Assalamualaikum and a very good evening to all our viewers who are watching Lebaran AWANI. I am Hafiz Marzukhi and with me,
And I'm Farhana, Sheikh.
Selamat Hari Raya Aidilfitri. Throughout the next 30 minutes, we will be speaking to, well, anyone and anyone who's willing to speak about Raya and share with us such a festive moment. But before that, I need to ask, as we all know, this year is a very special Raya as compared to the previous years because as you know, we've been in lockdown for 2 years. Is it 2 years?
Yes, it's 2 years.
And time flies by so fast. But first, Farhana, how are you spending your Raya this year?
Well, Raya this year is a bit different, Hafiz, as compared to the previous 2 years, as you mentioned. All my family members will be coming down from Shah Alam. To Shah Alam, to my house in Shah Alam, as compared to the previous 2 years where I spent it alone in the house, by myself.
Yeah, we all do. As we all know, the previous 2 years we've been stuck in MCO, lockdowns, and COVID-19 cases have been on the rise. But I guess it's more optimistic this year. But as for me, I think I'll be going down to Penang to celebrate Raya with my close family members and also meet my relatives there. However, enough about me, enough about us actually. Here to celebrate Raya with us today is a very special guest, Associate Professor Dr. Amer Siddiq, Amer Nordin. He is a consultant psychiatrist at University Malaya or UM. Thank you so much, Dr. Amer, for being with us. Selamat Hari Raya to you.
Selamat Hari to both of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. But first, Dr. Amer, you've heard our episodes of Raya. But what about you? What is your plan for Raya this year?
Well, I think similarly like to both of you, it will be my first time really celebrating Hari Raya after 2 years. Surprising it's been, 2 years. So I'll be probably going down to Johor this year to be with some family which I've not seen for 2 years at the moment.
Yeah. It has been a saddening experience. But I mean, we all know we've been we've been stuck with MCO and everything. How are they looking at it for this year, Raya?
Well, I think it'd be quite interesting. I mean, the good thing is that my immediate family is here in Kuala Lumpur. So despite the fact that we were having MCOs over the last 2 years, I've also managed to still see them at some point. But we've not been able to see a number of our older relatives, particularly my aunties and some uncles. And I think it'll be really nice to be able to go back this time and see them for quite a while.
Yeah, it's definitely a good time now, as we enter the transition to endemicity phase, right? Where people are starting to live normally, starting to go out, starting to meet family. So just a segue to that, as a mental health advocate, right? What do you see in terms of the well-being? What do you observe in terms of the well-being of the people generally for the past 2 years, especially now that we are entering, sort of a phase to normalcy?
Well, I think it's really nice that you're asking this question because, prior to COVID, sort of like 2019, the studies have shown that probably 3 in 10 individuals are struggling with some mental health issue. But over the past 2 years, a number of researchers have done some work looking at the mental well-being of Malaysians during this period of the pandemic. And what we've noticed is that there was a rise of about 1 in 2 individuals struggling with a mental health issue. So it could be issues related to sleep, it could be issues related to depressed mood, it could be issues related to anxiety, or even stress. But what we've noticed is that there has been an increased number of individuals complaining or reporting that they're struggling with mental health issues over the last 2 years.
Yes, I think looking back at that and all the symptoms that you've actually described, I've experienced some form or another. But I think the question is, with the reopening of borders and transitioning into endemicity, do you see some sort of improvement in that? Is the pressure finally letting go?
Well, I think it's going to be, you're going to have some individuals who will probably do quite okay, but then there'll also be some that are still very anxious and worried about, what to expect next. I mean, we know that we're moving towards endemicity. However, we're still in that zone where we still need to do some level of compliance to certain standard operating procedures. So there'll be definitely a number of people who get a little bit worried. But I think the good thing is that there's hope for people that things are moving towards normality. And hopefully we'll all be able to do the things that we used to do prior to 2020.
We all wish
we all wish that as well. Now, throughout, these are unprecedented time the past 2 years, and even now, as we still do live with COVID-19, right? throughout this years, I think mental health advocate, NGOs and all that have been talking more about, mental health issues and advocating more about it, right? We as media, we do observe that. So do you think the stigma on mental health have shifted during this pandemic?
Well, I think first of all, I wanted to thank all of you for the work that you've done over the last 2 years and really pushing the awareness of mental health. There's going to be a sort of a cloud over a silver lining, is that I think globally, even talking to colleagues internationally, the awareness of mental health issues has risen over the last 2 years. In Malaysia, for example, we have never ever had support in terms of federal funding for mental health prior to 2020. If you remember, there have been in the budget 2020, 21, a number of support has been given for non-governmental organizations to further assist Malaysians who are struggling with mental health issues. So definitely over the last 2 years, there has been a rise in the level of awareness. Some colleagues in non-governmental organizations have also been a little bit more creative in the way that they've provided support. We have something called the mental health psychosocial support system that's running through all the hospitals. A lot of the NGOs are working on psychological first aid, things that were not really mentioned prior to 2020. So, despite the fact that we've all struggled with pandemic, there has been some positives in terms of at least the field that I'm dealing with. Sadly, however, it also sort of shares with all of us the issues that we have not been doing before. Yeah? We've not invested enough, so therefore when we had the pandemic, we were a little bit caught off guard. And I think the good thing is that we're trying to do things to actually rectify that.
Yeah, actually that's what we want. I guess this is part of the new normal, also to speak. Another part of new normal, I should say, is actually the working from home system.
Oh yes.
I'm sure you've experienced some form of it as well.
We have some form of hybrid arrangement
we've had,
as well.
I mean, even now, even as we transition to endemicity, there's still some level of working from home. So, how do you see this, I would call it this phenomenon, this working from home phenomenon, how does it affect mental health well-being, especially among the general labor? Of course, there will be different sectors, but generally.
Yeah, so I think first of all, we have to get the concept of working from home and working at home correct, yeah? So I think in March 2020, when we first started this problem with regard to COVID, we were really working at home. The MCO was declared on, I think, 18th of March. And then suddenly all of us, wherever we were stuck. Initially it was 2 weeks and then it became 3 months. Yeah. However, moving forward along the year, we've noticed that as we had multiple MCOs along the way, we got better at working from home. Because initially we didn't have our computers, maybe some of us were in an environment that was not conducive. We did not know how to work with spouses, family, all involved. But by the time we got to 2021, I think most of us were a little bit more a bit more proficient and efficient in that, right? So I think there's going to be there's no way of turning back. However, I think moving forward, the desire to work from home and the sort of the technology from home is provided, but I think it's just the wants from companies, I think that will still be something that we need to consider. Because, it's still much easier to do things like this. In fact, I met Farhana online for the first time. Today's the first time, right? On Raya that we're meeting each other. Physically. So definitely, this kind of thing you can't replace it from working from home.
Not for anything.
Definitely.
Not for anything, All right. So moving on to, I guess, one of the main questions that I'm sure a lot of viewers here would want to know, and Hafiz and myself would like to know as well. I think one of the main concern with COVID-19, especially now during Raya season, is if we do get COVID-19. Because, unlike any other type of disease like flu or maybe not chickenpox, but, other diseases, they don't require quarantine.
Yes.
So with COVID-19 requiring at least 7 days quarantine for now, how do you think, what is your advice for people who would want to manage if they get COVID-19 during this Raya season and, they're stuck at home being apart from their families?
Yeah, I think first of all, the restrictions, a little bit of the SOPs are still there. As we're doing right now in close confined spaces, it's still advisable to wear a mask. A lot of infection has been prevented with the mask. It's still advisable to have a level of distance. And I think for some of our friends who are visiting, please do your RTK prior. Be safe about yourself before you sort of go out there and meet lots of people. But for some of us who might be unlucky, for some reason along the way we get a positive COVID testing, I think it's our responsibility, number one, to isolate ourselves. Yeah, to isolate ourselves. Now, what can you do while you're sort of struggling at home alone is probably the advice. Yeah. So I think first of all, you need to really make sure that you have a routine. A lot of us have actually struggled a lot during this last 2 years without having a routine. So having a routine is really useful. Making sure that you have adequate sleep is really useful. I think we're getting a bit better in knowing how to do some level of exercise in small spaces. You know, if you're not aware, please make sure that you know what to do. You know, like maybe HIIT, for example, if you don't do running, but at least a little bit of exercise definitely will help in terms of improving your mood. And of course, in Hari Raya, it's really important with these new gadgets that we have to contact family and friends either by phone or by FaceTime or whichever thing, to connect. It's still okay to be able to connect. Don't isolate yourself to the point that nobody knows that you're still here.
Yeah, after all, Raya is like one whole month, right?
Yeah,
that's
and
all
I guess
they say.
families can also send over some kuih raya for you to enjoy while you're at home. So that's that.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to continue more on this topic. Stay tuned to Lebaran Awani. Welcome back to Lebaran Awani. I'm Hafiz Marzukhi, and with me is Farhana Sheikh. Yes, and we are talking to Associate Professor Dr. Amer Siddiq Amer Nordin. He's the consultant psychiatrist at University Malaya. And as before the break, we were speaking about the relevance of social platforms, Facebook, FaceTime, Google Meet. How critical are these tools, you'll say, in today's communication?
Well, I think it's really critical. I mean, these last 2 years have really shown how useful these tools are. Can you imagine having to go through what we've all been through over the last 2 years without these gadgets? Yeah. I think it would be quite a different kind of world that we'll be living in. Yeah. However, as we know, these tools have positives and negatives. So it's really important that you pace yourself with these gadgets, despite the fact that we're all celebrating Hari Raya. Raya is to be enjoyed outside, with friends and family, since we're able to do that. Apart from those who are stuck in quarantine, but just sort of minimize some of that time so that you can actually enjoy what's available in front of you.
Yeah, I guess for those who are, if you're not positive, you might as well enjoy each other's company. Otherwise, you can always.
Especially now in the transition to endemicity phase, where we do get to go out, we do get to meet family and friends. So speaking of which, the fear of COVID-19 may not be as prevalent as it was before, when early on, the first 1.5 years or so. So, people are remaining cautious, but some people are still going out, still getting to meet family and friends. But there are people who are cautious still about COVID-19, especially with emerging new variants and borders being open. There are people who are coming in and coming out. So, what is your advice for these people who are still being cautious about COVID-19, who are still a bit anxious as we transition towards the endemicity phase?
Well, I think it's really important that we take note that there's going to be two groups of people. There's going to be the group of people that will be very out there, outgoing, pretty much reduced risk in terms of their mindset about what's happening out there. There's going to be another group who probably been affected with difficult COVID, either their family or friends, or they're themselves still struggling with long COVID. So it's only sort of understandable that they will be a little bit more cautious. I think what we need to do as a community is actually be at least aware that there's going to be these two groups of people and just be kind to each other. So if you've got a friend who wants you to do an RTK before you come to their place, by all means, out of respect to the friend, do one, yeah? But at the same time, it's going to be a friend who probably is a little bit more outgoing, that wants to sort of communicate with you or be with you for quite a little bit more. If you're not comfortable, inform that person. I think it's really important that we sort of be a bit more tolerant and a bit more understanding in this period of time, because we're really not out of the woods yet. We're sort of in the middle of it. We're not really out of the woods, so it's only to be expected that these things are happening.
Yeah, I mean, normalized testing is basically. You don't need
especially when we're meeting friends and family during Raya season, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, of course, Farhana just spoke about COVID-19, people who had COVID-19, but also throughout these past 2 years, I'm sure throughout the time, some of the whether your relatives or your friends have suffered from depression, anxiety. How should the people, as they go celebrating Raya, be what they should be mindful of? when they meet these people?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that you're right. In fact, to me personally, I think 100% of Malaysians have struggled with some level of mental health need. Yeah, probably 1 in 2 are struggling a little bit more, but I think all of us have had some level of emotional response towards COVID. Now, I think for those of us who might have major issues as a result of their involvement with their mental health in the last 2 years, or even more recently, I think one of it is for us to understand and appreciate that not everyone, everyone gets through certain conditions differently. So the first thing is to be kind to each other. I think the second one is that individuals that are struggling with a mental health issue, yes, they might be a little bit different, but they're just humans like all of us. So again, extend that greeting to them, ask them how they're doing. They will probably reply back. It's really important for us to normalize that people might be having issues and that they'll be able to respond accordingly. I think some of us are worried that if we talk to them that we might get the illness itself. That doesn't happen. That's the first thing, yeah?
It's not contagious like COVID-19.
I think the second one is that people are worried that if I talk to him, the person will be even more depressed. That's also not true. In fact, the person might feel a little bit relieved that people are reaching out to that person. And I think the third one is that people are sometimes just worried that by discussing about this issue, then it becomes bigger. No, the prevalence of certain conditions are as such. It's not going to be related to whether you reach out to them and say hello or not.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what you said just now, some of us do struggle with some form of mental health issues throughout these 2 years, right? So you mentioned a few just now for people who are in quarantine and how they should go about their daily life to improve their mental health. So in terms of practicing good habits in general, right, to improve our mental health and well-being, especially for many of us who have coped with, pandemic fatigue, anxiety, and all that. So, what are your tips for, generally for all of us to improve our mental health?
The first 2 tips is free, supposedly easy to do, but very difficult to maintain. Yeah. So first is actually to make sure that you sleep regularly. So most of us here probably don't sleep very well. In fact, there's a study looking at sleep among Malaysians that wasn't very positive. So make sure that probably if you're below 50 to have 7 or 8 hours of sleep as much as you can. And probably those above 50, 60, probably 6 to 7 be good. So that's the first thing. Make sure they have regular sleep. The second one...
Are you referring to continuous sleep or...
continuous sleep as much as you can.
I think we're all calculating how much sleep we have in our head.
I think the second one is to make sure that you're exercising regularly. I mean, the data has shown that 150 minutes per week, about intensity of brisk walking is just enough, but it's about consistency. It's not about Hafiz saying, hey doc, I done what 150 minutes this week, I'm good. No, it's about 150 minutes per week regularly over the next few weeks, and that will increase mental well-being and of course improve your physical health as well. So that's the second one. I think the third one is that we're not investing enough in terms of stress management. This is what the major issue that we saw over the last 2 years. If you think about yourself and you reflect back about what and how you manage stress yourself, you might have a certain method of managing stress that you've used all the while that you've been alive, yeah? But when COVID-19 came in, your coping mechanism is this high, but the stress from COVID-19 was that big.
Yeah.
And in fact, it kept up going out because, there's just so much uncertainty. But the way that you cope was just that much. So it's really important that we try to improve on the way that we cope. Make sure that, for example, a method to relax yourself. Breathing exercise is one of them, mindfulness being another one. Whichever one that you do, it's not really important. Make sure that you consistently try to improve yourself. The third one is make sure that you also know what you're eating. I mean, most of us are going to stuff ourselves over the next few hours of today, because one whole month, some of us have not been eating. All this good food right in front of us is very tempting for us to keep on taking on. But I think you've really got to be careful not to take too much sweet food because your sugar level is going to go up, you feel happy, and it'll just drop very quickly.
And then you feel sad.
But if you take like nasi lemak or some curry the whole day, it's going to be very sluggish. So the mood is going to be a little bit on the sluggish side. So you just make sure that you pace yourself a little bit. And I think finally, in terms of mental well-being, what you can do is things like journaling. Gratitude journaling might be a little bit helpful. In terms of sort of improving and sort of just being thankful about what you've been able to achieve and how far you've gone over the last 2 years.
Yeah. When speaking about coping mechanisms, I find it very interesting because, I think all of us, and I'm sure the viewers as well, have their own ways, whether it's playing games or just running, hiking, watching movies. As you know, Doctor Strange is coming out this particular season. So, everyone has their own ways. But I think overall, as Malaysians, do we treat stress well? Are we dealing with it? Are we dealing it in a way we should, or is the awareness? So actually, what I'm asking is the awareness of dealing or coping with stress really there among Malaysians?
Sadly, I think, Hafiz, it's not there. I mean, I've done a number of sessions with a number of individuals from a number of corporations over the last couple of years, discussing about mental health and well-being. And what we've noticed is that many people have allowed stress to lead their lives for quite a lot. As a result of that, as the COVID-19 pandemic doesn't seem to go away over the last 2 years, people have started to deteriorate in terms of their mental health, leading to certain individuals struggling with mental illness. So, in your observation of are they dealing with it well, the answer is no. Can we do better? Definitely yes. Is people's awareness increasing? Yes. I think, like I said, one of the things that people have noticed is that they have this emotional response of the last 2 years. Some of them can give it a name: frustration, sadness, anger, anxiety. Some people just know there's something not right, but they don't know what it is. But as a result of this emotion, they were able to discuss this. And of you guys in the media have actually put a lot of material out there for them to actually keep it, hey, I might be struggling with this thing and I want to do something about it. So that's what's happening over the last couple of years.
So I guess, a little bit more on that. What do you think are the lessons from the pandemic that we can learn about when it comes to taking care of our mental health and also the mental health of others?
I think what we have noticed over and over again is that people have now finally appreciated, as the World Health Organization had mentioned, that when you talk about health and being healthy, it's about being physically healthy, having good social communications, and thirdly, to actually put some effort in your mental health. So before this, people were focusing a lot on the physical aspects. They were not talking about the social communication aspects, nor were they looking at the mental health aspects. So I think what we've learned over the last 2 years is that most people are now appreciating that mental health is definitely a component of health. What I want to put across to all my friends out there is that we've also started to appreciate that financial health is also mental health. So it's really important. So it's really important that we actually improve our financial literacy, because it definitely affects our mental health, and eventually it will affect our physical health and just the general well-being. So these are two of the things that I think most of us have learned over the last 2 years.
Well, okay. There you have it, Hafiz and Dr. Amer. We have here with us, we just discussed about, mental health issues and all the issues surrounding it. We have Dr. Siddiq, consultant psychiatrist from It's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
And, today is the first day of Raya. So we, on behalf of Astro AWANI, would like to wish everyone Selamat Hari Raya Aidilfitri. And hopefully, you get to enjoy it with good food and family and friends. And have a joyous Aidilfitri, everyone. Bye.
Bye.